Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's LinkedIn Live Fireside Chat. I'm Ed Monk, CEO of the Learning and Performance Institute, and today I'm genuinely thrilled to be joined by Jeff Fissel, VP of Technology at GP Strategies. Hi, Jeff. How are you doing?
I'm well. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, me too. We've got a lot to get through. Obviously, we know AI is everywhere right now, but when it comes to learning, the real question that we're getting, Jeff, is how are teams actually using it, and more importantly, what's genuinely delivering results. So this is going to be a grounded, no fluff conversation about the
I like
practical
it.
side. Yeah, about the practical side of AI and learning. We're going to dive into what's working, what's not, and how learning teams can move beyond buzzwords to make some real impact. So, four things that we think you're going to hear about from Jeff over the next 30 minutes, some examples of AI tools that are driving real outcomes, common mistakes to avoid when getting started, how to integrate AI into your team's workflows, and maybe we can touch on some of the ethical and learner-centered side of this as well. You can pose questions if you want in the chat, and we'll try and address some towards the end. So welcome. If you're experimenting with AI right now or you're scaling it across your organization, I'm hoping this session will give you a real reality check and a practical roadmap. So let's get started, Jeff. Actually, can you tell us a little bit about your role then at GP Strategies and how you're engaging with AI and learning?
Sure. Happy to do that. And I'll set the stage a little bit of my history. So I started my career as the co-founder of an enterprise video platform, and I was a developer. I'm now a failed developer. Turns out there were way smarter people than me to write the code to do that sort of part of it. I led that business, and that's how I joined LTG and joined GP Strategies. And the last 2 years at GP Strategies, I've been the vice president of technology, and it's all been about generative AI. Like, how do we actually get to those promised productivity gains? And we were catching up earlier about this. The Gartner hype cycle kind of resonates a lot to me in this moment of, like, sadly you have that like innovation curve, and then you have the peak of inflated expectations, and then sadly the trough of disillusionment, and then over there you have that slope of enlightenment and plateau of productivity. And that's really what I like to say we've been helping organizations try to figure out, is how to get from that tinkering to those real productivity gains. And I'm excited to share some of those with you today.
Yeah, that's really cool. And yeah, I'm glad you said that, actually, and not the Dunning-Kruger effect, obviously. Much more bigger fan of that. So you're mentioning the Gartner hype model there. Also, let's start by, I'm going to counter that with
Okay.
something from McKinsey. In 2023, so it is 18 months, they said that while 50% of organizations claim to be using AI, only 11% report meaningful ROI from those implementations. That's the state of AI report. A year and a half ago, things have changed. But
Mhm.
do you think there's still, you talk about hype, do you think there's still a gap between the hype and the AI reality in L&D?
I absolutely do. But I think we're getting there. I think there's still this expectation of its magic, and we point it at big piles of words, and magic will happen out of it. And I think we have to get past that. We have to debunk that and figure out what it really is, what it's good at, more importantly, what it's not good at, and start to use it within our teams and embrace it as part of the teams. And I think a big thing to me is rethinking the workflows of what we're doing. I think the failed things are take existing process that you have today and just try to slowly add improvements with AI to each of those little things, when you might actually want to rethink that entire workflow. And that becomes the more exciting bit to me when we think about those sort of things. And those are where I think people are seeing the biggest productivity gains. The problem is that's more than a technology initiative. That's people, process, that's the whole change that goes with it. And I think that's why it's taking people longer to get to these, is it's not just turning on a switch.
Yeah,
There's some change management, and that those people that go with it and the processes around that.
it's a culture issue, isn't it? I think. And
Yeah.
it's funny you mention that, because the top two challenges for CLOs, according to our data, number one, consistently over the last 3 or 4 years, has been learning culture. And
Yep.
AI has made its way from nowhere, obviously, infusing AI into the learning ecosystem, has now made its way up to two, but not number one, because actually what it can affect is the learning culture. And that's the sort of
Mhm.
foundation issue, if you like. So Okay, in your experience, then I'm going to try and pin you down on this one really early on in this conversation. Now I've got you. Can you give us examples of maybe a couple of areas where you have seen AI deliver real measurable value associated with learning? I was going to say in learning programs, but the way you've just answered the last question, it might not necessarily be a program. So, wider context in learning.
Yeah, well, yes, I have a couple great examples here. One I'll start with is around understanding the data that we have today. There's the old adage, garbage in, garbage out. Everyone's heard it. But it's really true in this AI world of how do you start to minimize hallucinations? Because one of the biggest fears of using generative AI is that everyone's had is just watching it make up things, like and write it in a very well and elegant way. So you have to be really careful. It's a really good BS engine. If you're not worried, cautious of that. So how do you start to anchor and ground it on the right information that's there? So the first part of that is using AI to understand the data that you have today. It turns out across a lot of these learning organizations, we have tons of knowledge. The only problem is it's locked up in a bunch of hour-long e-learning SCOs or hour-long videos or 3-day long instructor-led courses and a lot of the longer form stuff that we're here. And sadly, we never had humans that wanted to go click next through all that stuff for us and break it all down and understand it. And AI can do that. We can leverage AI to start to understand what we have today. And that's one of the first successes we've helped a lot of organizations with is pointing a series of kind of learning discovery agents, in essence, at your current library to understand what's actually happening within it. What's good, what's irrelevant, where is that information, so that you can start to use that data for some of the newer use cases. So to me, that was a kind of a quick win, and it wasn't controversial because there wasn't a single human that was like, yeah, I want to do that. And you're able to get an immense amount of value out of looking at what was covered across your existing library. And then that can become the fuel for some of the other use cases I'll talk about in a second of starting to create new content. Because it can be overwhelming if you're like, I need to bring it all the stuff. And we're like, no, you actually have it all. It's just locked up in a lot of ways.
Yeah, very true. I read something the other day, and forgive me, I can't remember who wrote it, but a couple of years ago, a year ago, it was about moving from content to context.
Yep.
And now somebody wrote content to context to contentedness. And I really like that in terms
I
of
do. That's
yeah. We don't want to be clicking through, boring e-learning anymore, ever again. And things can happen more quickly. But I still feel we're still feeling at the LPA like there's a kind of general phase of experimentation still at this point.
Yeah.
Not a bad thing. And Harvard Business Review suggests that success at scale often comes down to AI-ready processes and leadership buy-in, not just the tech itself. So, in line with what you're saying about this is actually a culture issue, not necessarily just a tech issue.
Yeah.
How can we move as organizations from experiments to like enterprise-wide implementations of AI in learning? What do we need to do?
Yeah. So I'm glad you brought that up. I think it kind of plays into the next example that I've seen real productivity gains is when you start to embed that human wisdom into the process. I think you talk a lot about intelligence and wisdom and the difference of those things. Like AI is going to beat us in intelligence all day long. It's already way smarter than us. It doesn't necessarily have that wisdom of how you start to apply that. A really practical example we found was people were wanted to use generative AI to take a video, an hour-long video, and they wanted to create assessment questions for it. And it turns out if you dump that video into ChatGPT or Copilot and say, write assessment questions, it's going to write you a whole bunch of assessment questions. But once you get past the party trick of watching the words come out and you read them, you're like, oh no, those are really bad assessment questions. They'll be like, what color shirt was the person wearing? What was the name of the book? Like they're very random. But then you introduce this workflow into it that any good learning person would know of. The first step is process it. Second step is detect the learning objectives or learning outcomes of what you need in that. Then when you write the assessment, anchor them to the learning outcomes. Add that one extra step into the flow, exponentially higher quality outputs that you're getting. And that's all things that we would have done. But I think like we're a little mesmerized of I can just write and it's going to start writing things back to me. But we have to embed that expertise of kind of what good looks like
Mm.
into AI. And I know we talk agentic AI is all over the place now. It's I think if we said that in the title, we might have gotten 100 more people to attend. I don't know. But it's a really hot topic. But to me, what that is embedding expertise of what a good outcome is into these agents, so they know what to do. And you're not leaving that up to chance or guessing in AI. And to me, I see that's how we're scaling inside of a lot of organizations. Is once we get them to get that wisdom, that organization specific knowledge of how things should be done into these discrete agents or processes, then you can start to sequence those things together and you can get to some really amazing, reliable outputs that are scalable and aren't just haphazard.
Yeah, I'm going to pick out something that you used there. You said organization specific, and I
Mhm.
think that's the gap at the moment. So AI tools that are being used are so wide and generic in the content that they're scraping to give you the answers. But so do you see a specific home for a small language model that is only based on company-wide content, which will kind of protect the learning experience and the outcomes?
I think you could do that, but I think the most common tactic right now is using a process called retrieval augmented generation, or RAG, where you're not actually messing with the large language model yourself. You're basically taking your data and atomizing it, breaking it down into vectors, chunks, and then those chunks get embedded into the asks that go to the LLM. So it allows you to use your data safely with an LLM, without having to go train your own model or fine tune a model. And a lot of applications. So don't worry about implementing that yourself. If you use Copilot Studio or GPTs, or there's a lot of tools out there that implement RAG, that do that. But that's a technique that's available that helps you start to ground the model on sound information. So you can say, hey, only work off of this stuff I've given you. I don't care about your knowledge. Like, I want you just to stay in your lane there. And that's also one of the best practices that we talk to a lot about is grounding the models and grounding the tools on specific subsets of information. I think there was a big misconception in the market of point AI at huge pile of words and it's going to figure it all out. And it
Mm.
turns out that it's not that good at that. It kind of falls over, it gets lazy, whatever you want to do. There's technical words for that too, but I like to think it gets lazy.
Yeah, and that's really fascinating to me. So it still requires some of that kind of human tweaking and flavoring, if you like, the andragogical expertise, how
Yeah.
humans learn to affect the a massive intelligence that these platforms have. And we've got a question come in, which I'm going to
Nice.
ask you now. Somebody said we had to challenge some of our early assumptions around AI. What were the biggest mindset shifts your team had to make to get real value from it?
It was, I mean, I think the biggest thing was rethinking the work, like how things had always been done. In learning design, it was like, is Addy still the right mod? Like an AI enabled Addy might not be the right answer.
Mm.
Maybe there's a different way of thinking about doing that. And then the other part was letting go of the publishing part of it. Like AI is actually the value of AI is going to be when we can personalize learning to the N of one, the individual.
Mm.
But to do that, that means we can't review everything that goes out. So how do we build that trust? And I think that's still a thing that we're constantly overcoming is how do we have trust in the system? And I think there's a good analogy in like pharmaceuticals or other manufacturing things where you can't taste everything that goes off the line. So how do you reliably know what comes out is sellable?
Mm.
It's the supply chain equation. You know you have good source quality materials, data, and you know the machinery, how it's processed, the agents of what they're doing, that they're going to have reliable outputs. And once you build trust in that system, it allows you to start to move the humans into other components in the value stream.
Yeah, that's great. It's still a lot of what you're saying, which I find really interesting, is actually about the people rather than the technological advancement. Is that fair?
That's absolutely the case. It's a huge change management. Like
Mm.
the tech's the easy bit in a way.
Mm.
I mean, there's things you need to do, but it's definitely about the people and process and the mindset of how do you do it. And it's not going to be like we're in an area where it's not going to be perfect. If we wait for someone else to figure it out, like we're going to be behind. by the time it's ready to go. So I think I'm always encouraging people to lean in a little bit to the messiness of it, start to kind of figure out where it works, where it doesn't work, and then you can start to productize that a little more.
Yeah, well, I couldn't agree more with that. So, in the spirit of that, and this being, about of fallibility, where have you seen AI initiatives go wrong in linking that specifically to learning? Are there any common causes of failure, Jeff?
I think one is not knowing what data you're working off of. If you're just going to the large language model and asking it questions and not knowing what it's using, you might get great answers sometime, and then other times you might get really bad answers. And I think that also plays into kind of chatbots. There's chatbots everywhere. Every tool's got some sort of chat with experience in it, and most of those work really well for, let's say, 2 to 5, a dozen files or something that you load into it, maybe a little more in some cases. But if you start loading thousands of pieces of content in it, you actually create the same problem again. It's bad at guessing. And then you have this unreliable thing where with some people it guesses right, other people it guesses wrong, and you don't have that trust in the system. So one thing that we've stumbled on too is this, like, let's go enterprise, let's go wide real quickly. And we've learned that, like, grounding on specific information and finding the specific knowledge that specific tools need and only giving them that knowledge is really the thing that's helped it scale. And sadly, that caused a little bit more work. I think there was a Gartner stat, I could find the year of, it was recently, that said, like, of the successful projects, 80% of the time of that adoption of that project was in the data preparation, was getting the data right. Like, that was my majority of the work. And sadly, everyone's focused on those learner experience bits, the end learner bits, the chat bots, and what shows up. And those are great, but they rely on having good, well-structured, well-formed data. And if you don't have that, those will never be reliable.
Yeah, I went to an amazing presentation a few years ago now at the top of the Gherkin building in London. The CEO of Satalia, the company at the time, again, I can't remember his name, but he was talking about, and it's formed actually a lot of the principles around the modern LPI, data being the foundation, moving towards information, knowledge, and wisdom. And we still have that in almost every kind of annual review slide. So great to hear that. You've mentioned, I think, I'm going to paraphrase, that maybe there's too much focus on automating content generation through the tech and not enough on the idea of a meaningful learning experience or what it means for people. You've obviously referred to the Gartner side of things as well, the Gartner report and the Gartner hype. Gartner warned of quote AI fatigue, unquote, right? And it talked about inflated expectations and underwhelming results. I love the language that Gartner uses.
Oh yeah.
So only 19% of AI projects reach full production deployment. So what should learning leaders stop doing when it comes to adopting AI?
Oh, well, I it's almost a joke I have with our chief learning officer because we're building a tool, and he's like, please don't accidentally build a tool that lets people build more mediocre e-learning content, because that's not what the world needs. And I think there is, like, this little bit of, like, let's not just recreate. More is not what people need. They need better and different types of experiences. So as much as it might look easy to go spit out a ridiculous amount of e-learning courses now really fast, like, I want to challenge that, like, that feeling of maybe that's not the right answer. Maybe there's newer, different experiences that are out there that are more AI enabled, more personalized, like, that are better learning experiences at the end of the day. And to aim towards those versus just more, because I think AI can really easily let people just flood the sound waves with more.
Yeah, we want cars, not faster horses, I guess.
Yeah, it's the old Ford quote, exactly.
Yeah.
If you ask people that, like, yeah, that's what they might ask for, is more e-learning. I'm like, I don't know. I haven't met that many learners that say they want to LMS something ever, or have raised their hand to want to take e-learning. So
no, me neither. So on the L&D, on the people side of L&D, then the people that are working in L&D, from my conversations, there's a lot of fear at the moment. what it's almost like an existential crisis because this is so good.
Mhm.
How are they going to adapt? You're somebody that I admire. When you write on LinkedIn and when you talk really honestly and really practically. So how are we going to reassure, or do we need to? Should we be honest and say, it's not happening? I'm afraid, L&D people. How are you seeing L&D teams skilling themselves to work with AI? Are there new roles emerging? What should they be doing?
Yeah, no, I don't buy into the doom and gloom around there. I think there's a lot of value that L&D professionals can add, both in the intermediary of like building that wisdom into the agents that exist, teaching these agents how to write good learning objectives, how to write good video scripts. I tell people all the time, go to ChatGPT and ask it to write you a podcast script, just like that. And once you read it, you're gonna be like, oh, that's a really boring podcast script. Like, but you have to like, but if you give it the right information of what a good podcast includes in learning and what's there, it will write you an amazing one. So how do you embed that expertise that you have today of what good looks like into the tools that you can get that higher quality output? And then the other area I think is we're going to be the data brokers. We're going to be the people who have to load and source and find that content that's there. We have a lot of organizations we work with that it turns out, and we're doing 30 minutes here, but it turns out a lot of smart people love pontificating in hour-long blocks on events, and they record those, which is spectacular. But sadly, no one ever watches those hour-long recordings. But there's tons of good information in there. So how do we start to curate that information? How do we start to pull that out? How do we start to use that for fuel to create new things? We have an organization now where we're taking these 2-hour long technical SME presentations and we're creating, using a series of agents, instructional shorts that are like 10-minute like Cliff Notes versions of them, and they're using synthetic audio and video from tools like Colossian or Synthesia, and they're creating this much more consumable content. When the other thing a lot of learning people talk about is like the moments of learning need. It's never a single thing. There's not a single intervention. There's lots of times when learning's needed. And traditionally, we never had the budget to hit all those moments. We focused on those initial interventions, the first training, or maybe the performance support components of it. But now, like with the power of AI, we can think about, can we take that one bit of knowledge and transform it into a 20-minute relevant piece of content? Because to me, like micro learning, all this, it doesn't matter the length. It's all about the relevance. If something's relevant to me, I'll spend an hour on it. It doesn't, if it's not relevant to me, I'm not even going to give it 10 seconds. So it doesn't matter how long it is. So it's all about relevance and how do you get to that relevance? And I think the power of AI now allows us to not have to raise up the level of what we're creating to hit a larger audience. We can create more micro focused e-learnings or enable these experiences that can personalize that content to the individual. So I think our profession, our people here are going to move into those things of deciding what that right information is, the curators of that information, and then apply that expertise, and then kind of let go a little bit of the creation delivery bits of it. That's my personal opinion.
I agree. That's absolutely fascinating and encouraging and reassuring for us at the LPI, because when we ran Learning Live, the big conference in September last year, and we've got obviously Learning Live AI coming up at the end of June, which you'll be there, Jeff.
I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing you there. We actually we record each of the sessions and then create learning guides immediately out of those sessions using AI. Nice. So if you do, because there's 6 streams going on, if you've missed one session, which is a pain, isn't it? Then you can, the following day, you can be getting these guides coming through, which will be, highlighting all of the different key points in learning that happened in that session.
You're already doing it. Well, we should talk about creating little micro instructional videos for you out of those too, out of that content.
That's great. Definitely keen on doing that. Would love to do that. Okay. Here's a bit of a left field question then.
All right.
25 minutes in. So we've both been in learning a long time, right? And one of the things that gets an absolute kicking all of the time, justifiably to many, is this idea of learning styles, right? Because there's, everybody posts on LinkedIn, there's no empirical evidence of learning styles.
Yeah.
You're not a kinesthetic or an auditory or so, but I am is it just me, or I'm starting to see people kind of now rebelling against that and saying that with AI, it's almost like we want to do that again and say, well, no, you see what it is. AI can create. You just actually said there, we could create some some videos for you. So, is there a sense that AI is reintroducing learning styles? It's not. I'm not trying
I,
to catch you out on that one.
yeah,
Genuinely.
it's a good question. Like, and I'm not a learning scientist, so I will answer this in my own kind of personal experience and what I've seen here, which is like it's about the relevance and it's in the like we're all busy, we're all professional meeting attenders now in this virtual world. Like we don't have the time to do it, so it's how can I consume the information when I need to and in that moment. Like we've seen a huge uptick in people wanting podcasts right now for content.
Yeah.
Because I'm out walking the dog, I want to listen to something, or I'm traveling and I want to do that. And I think that like AI enables us to reach people that we always probably would have done, but we just never had the time and budget to do it. And we had to prioritize one over the other. And now we don't have to make that choice. We can do all. So I don't know if it's about like the learning styles necessarily, or just about like kind of meeting people where they are and what they need in that moment. And I think AI is an amazing performance support tool. Like,
Yeah.
man, dude, and the challenging thing, the interesting thing to kind of throw back in this a little bit is like when you think about that, like how good it is at supporting people at the point of need, like giving you what you need when you chat to do it, then rethinking what do I actually need to teach people now? Like what are the actual skills I need to go teach people? I might not need to teach them how to use the tool because the performance support tool has gotten so good that I can just rely on it to do that. So what am I teaching people and what do I focus on? And what are those like deliberately developmental moments that I want to cause to happen? And I think that's actually good for us because it allows us to focus on maybe some of the leadership skills, some of those sort of things where performance support might not be the right medium to do it, but we can focus on making those more impactful experiences
Yeah.
because the performance support stuff's already handled.
Yeah, maybe that literal context around those more generic examples that AI can give us. We can say, well, Dave in finance would do this, and
Yeah.
I think it is creating bizarrely, and I don't think anybody maybe would have predicted this at the beginning. It's actually building, I think, more empathy.
Oh
It's
yeah.
I think it's improving our emotional intelligence because it's giving us these examples. So, okay, final few minutes. Interestingly for you, Jeff, I think, because this is something that you major on a lot. The questions that are coming in seem to be mainly around this idea of data.
Mhm.
So, and you're a big advocate of this being the sort of foundation of success when we're talking about AI. So, big question: what data should learning teams focus on when they are evaluating the impact of AI in programs?
Yeah, well, I'll answer it in two flavors here. So I think one, we always when we think of data, we talk a lot about analytics as data, and I'll talk about that because I think there's some power we can do. But I also want to frame it back to data being the knowledge and the information too. So separate those thoughts, and we should think about what knowledge do we own? What are we the brokers of? What do we have that we can then transform and enable our organization to perform at a higher level? So think about that lens. And then when you're thinking about traditional analytics, now, this is crazy to be like, now we all have data scientists at our fingertips that can do like everything to your heart's desire. I used to think my superpower was being able to do pivot tables and VLOOKUPs. And now like I don't like that's just done automatically. And I'm kind of sad, but also way better, more analytical type processing of data. Like you can start to open up and rethink those sort of things. And then I also challenge people of what you're tracking in these new tools is to make sure the tools you're using have some sort of sentiment feedback, a thumbs up, thumbs down, like is it good? And then the result good or high quality. And then the other thing is in chat experiences, chat's kind of like the new search. And not everyone tracked what people searched for or logged what people searched for. I think you should log what people are chatting about and be very open about it. Like don't big brother it. Don't lie about it. Just say, hey, we're doing this because that's how you're going to improve the experience of seeing what people are looking for, seeing if they're happy with the results that are coming back, and then if they're not, fixing that because that probably is a data problem. Like in most cases, if they're not happy with the result, it's a data problem or it's an agent, like a workflow problem. And monitoring those things. And I think that's part of your earlier question, like what our role is going forward is monitoring that to make sure that people are getting the performance they need, the content they need, or the learning they need to perform at their highest potential.
Is it fair to say it's also optimizing or driving organizational performance as well? So although
Oh yeah.
everything that you've spoken about is around the individual, which is really great, by the way, and refreshing to hear from somebody in a senior position as you, but equally, this is about organizational productivity and efficiency. If we get this right, actually, the company benefits, which should mean everybody benefits. Is that fair?
Yeah. I mean, this is the business impact of learning that we've all been hunting for forever, that mythical thing. So I think, yeah, I think we are better suited to hit that now than we've ever been, because of the capabilities we now have.
Yeah, agreed. So, ethical question. How do we ensure that these tools are being used ethically? Every time we interview somebody of your stature in these chats, this is a question that comes up, and there must be a fear of this. I think that's the problem or the challenge. So,
Yeah.
does it concern you? Does it concern the organization that you work for, and learning data privacy concerns, or is it just a
I,
free for all now?
I don't think it should be a free for all at all. Like inside a GP, we have a governance team that meets and thinks about this stuff and all the things that are going into it. But to me, I think the biggest best practice out is just transparency around it.
Yeah,
Transparency in what's created with AI and when AI is being used. And in this moment, I think trying to avoid scenarios where AI is making a decision for you, like keep those decision moments. We talk a lot about like human in the loop. It was like a technical term, but now it's kind of broadened into the business world of like, where are we intentionally putting those humans in which loops, and being open about that of like, hey, we had a human review this or do those kind of things. I think that's key in this moment because there is still so much fear around what's going on, the Terminator references, all the things that are there, and where it's going. And I don't think there needs to be. It's this. My hope is we actually stop talking about AI as much. Like we actually goes the way of cloud and internet and things that are in the background that just enable us to do our work. And it's about what we're doing, less about AI.
yeah, I agree. It's just a tool, isn't it? I think the cat might be in your background, maybe
Oh, I
not.
hear him. Yeah, I
Um,
hear him making noise there. Sorry about that.
no, it's okay. I was wondering if it was Cat GPT for a second there. What you mentioned there on transparency is echoed by. It was something I was going to actually ask you about, but you've answered it around the UK's Information Commissioner stressed the need for more than anything transparency when it comes to AI-driven decision making. So absolutely on the money in terms of, structurally, government-wise, what's happening here. So let's get to some kind of fun wrap-ups here,
Okay.
because we're already short of time. I could talk to
Yeah.
you all day. Two questions. First one, if a learning leader is just getting started, what should they just do tomorrow? Because there's such a massive spectrum of capability at the moment. And, we care about learning leaders here at the LPI. What should they be doing? One thing.
Oh, that's a one thing. I would say get in and start using it yourself. Buy a subscription, use the free tool, do whatever you need to do, like and have the experiences yourself and see where it falls short. Because I think the people that are the least afraid of AI right now that I meet are the people that are using it the most. Because you recognize that it's not going to take your job. That and why you need, and you're going to rethink your job in that moment and what your role is once you start to realize that yourself.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. Just start, I guess,
Yeah.
is the best advice. Right, I'm excited about your answer to this question.
Uh-oh.
What what excites you most about the future of AI in workplace learning?
I think to me, it enables us to get to what we always wanted, which was being able to personalize learning to the end of one, to get to those performance gains, to truly be a performance enabler to an organization. Like I see the path there now. That was always hard to visualize, and that I like. We had a story behind, but now it feels real. that we can
Mm,
get to those moments. And I'm excited to like see the new different types of learning experiences that actually have real learning, like people are actually learning and practicing and doing things with them. um, that's the exciting eye-opening bit to me, and that we move away from some of the traditional things that we were doing before. So that's
yeah.
the that's what I'm excited to see. That I think there's lots of vendors like ourselves and others out there that are pushing the boundaries in kind of these new types of learning experiences. And I think that's what the future is going to entail. Like it's not going to look the same as it does today.
Do you think it's the golden age of creativity? Well, I'll come back to that. What learners want and need are two very different things. How can we scaffold a pathway in the AI world? That's Kelly Rodriguez Brown who's asked that one. Thank you, Kelly.
That actually is a great point, because I think chatbots fall victim to this. Like
Mm,
everyone rushed to create a chatbot, but chatbots are only great if you know what to ask it. So how do you start to blend those kind of experiences that give people what they need, and then maybe layer chat on as an ability to scratch deeper? So I don't think everything should be a chat. I don't think you should replace e-learning with a chatbot or any sort of thing like that. I think there should still be, you're the expert of what should someone need to know to do their job. Skilling kind of plays into this, but I always caution people to think about like what is the work that the person needs to do in this moment versus what their job description says, because that's changed dramatically. And how do you anchor back to that, and how can you better enable that? And apologies for this cat. I don't know what's going on. He's got getting mad at me right now for some reason.
it's obviously disagreeing with what you're saying, I
Yeah.
think. Here we go. Test, maybe one more after this. As an instructional designer, I use AI for a variety of L&D tasks. I see that there are gaps in consistent processes in the use of AI across teams. Also, not many L&D professionals are fully taking advantage of custom GPTs for streamlining workflows. Can you come back to Tess on that one?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. It's kind of a statement, but I
Mm,
agree with you. Like, I don't think we're leaning into it as much, and I think custom GPTs are, use the word agent in place of that. Are That's our role now, is to start to create these agents with expertise built in that gives you the consistent repeatable outcomes. So a technical thing is structured outputs. So if you care about how do you get a consistent output, there's a technical practice in agent creation of giving it a structured output, giving it like what should be included. And then even going a step farther is reviewing that with an agent before it ever gets delivered to the human to make sure the AI did answer all the questions the way it should. And if it didn't, telling it to go back and try again.
mm.
And building those kind of workflows are how you start to get to the consistent outputs. So lean into creating custom GPTs and those sort of things.
Do you think it's specificity that's really important when we use these tools? The more specific we are, the better the value of what we're getting out of it, surely.
Yeah. Yes. Oh, for sure. Yeah. Like focus on the grounding kind of is the technical term there, but yes, absolutely.
Great. Rosie, last one, I think. How do you personally tell the difference between an AI use case worth pursuing and one that's just hype? Wow.
Uh, I don't know. You don't until you do it, probably.
Yeah.
Until you try. Now, I think the cool thing now, throw another buzzword out there, vibe coding, or I've heard even vibe working, is you can prototype things so fast now. So I think you can get out there and in natural language test something, build a prototype of something, an MVP of something, and try it and fail fast. Where before you that was hard to do, you can you can vibe your way into a lot of that. And I think so, get out and try it and see what works, and then scratch more at the things that are look promising.
Yeah, I mentioned it just a moment ago, and I really believe this. I think this is a golden age for creativity. I really do. I think now we have something that's democratizing information, education, performance. It's very cool to look at what's going to be coming out of this from different people, different organizations. And Jeff, it's been an absolute joy to talk to you today and to learn so much. Hopefully, ChatGPT is okay. I'm now concerned.
Okay.
Um, is there anything you want to say as a closing remark to for people that are
No,
listening?
no, I appreciate you listening, and thank you for having me on. This has been fun. We could talk about it all day. My biggest thing is kind of lean it, like get your hands dirty in this moment. play with it, vibe your way to some things, see what it can do. And if we can ever help, we're always here to talk to. I weirdly like talking about AI and learning. So please reach out to me on LinkedIn or anything, and I would love to continue the conversation.
Brilliant. Well, to anybody that's been in this and joined us, we'll, if it's okay, Jeff, we'll share how people can connect with you on LinkedIn. And
please do.
Thanks again. It's been really fascinating for me. I'll probably watch this back and learn some more. And we'll look forward to welcoming you to London on the 26th of June for Learning Live AI. Jeff Fissel, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ed. Really appreciate it.